Welcome back to LexTalks, fellow legal eagles. Ready for another deep dive? Today, we're tackling Article 19 of the Indian Constitution,
Hmm.
the one that covers all those essential freedoms.
It's the heart of citizens' rights, you could say, but it's not as simple as do whatever you want. It's all about understanding the freedoms, A and D, the reasonable restrictions that come with them. Crucial stuff for law students, really.
Yeah, it's like the Constitution is saying, okay, you can speak your mind, gather with your friends, move around freely, choose your job, even decide where you want to live in India, BUT.
There's a but, right?
Exactly.
Hmm.
A but. That's spelled out in Articles 19.2 through 19.6. That's where those limitations come in.
And it's not about squashing freedoms, it's about balance. Making sure one person's freedom doesn't step on someone else's rights or put the whole country at risk.
Boundaries, basically.
Yeah.
So let's start with the freedom closest to our hearts as law students, freedom of speech and expression. Article 19A, anyone.
Ah, yes, the cornerstone of democracy. It goes beyond just talking, though. It's about expressing yourself in every way, writing, art, protests, even silence. The free flow of ideas, that's what keeps a democracy alive and kicking.
Imagine you're a hotshot journalist about to publish an article criticizing the government. It's Article 19.1. You're adding your voice to the conversation, sparking debates, all that good stuff.
Right on. But remember those reasonable restrictions we talked about? Article 19.2 lays down 8 very specific grounds where the state can actually limit that freedom.
Let's hear them. We've got security of the state, friendly relations with other countries, public order, decency, and morality.
Contempt of court, defamation, incitement to an offense, and of course the big ones, sovereignty and integrity of India. Quite a list, eh? And as you can imagine how those restrictions are actually interpreted, well, that's been the center of a lot of legal debate.
It's like the Constitution is saying, speak your mind, but you stay within these lines. Got to keep things running smoothly for everyone.
And the ones who walk that tightrope, the judiciary, they're the ones who figure out what those restrictions actually mean, how far they can go, and make sure they're applied fairly. That's where landmark cases come in. They really shape how we understand these freedoms and those tricky limitations.
Like that famous case, Ramesh Thapar v. State of Madras.
Yeah.
The court made it clear that any restriction on free speech has to be really specific and can't be used to just silence people who are criticizing the government, dissent and all that.
Huge win for freedom of the press. Show just how important it is to have media that can speak truth to power, hold those bigwigs accountable.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Freedom of assembly time. That's under Article 9B, right? The right to peacefully gather, hold public meetings, even take out those big processions. Another cornerstone of democracy, wouldn't you say?
Think about all the historical movements that changed the world. They relied on that freedom, the power to come together and make their voices heard.
True. But there are limits here too, right?
Of course. Article 19.3 allows restrictions, again, reasonable ones. We're talking about protecting India's sovereignty and integrity, keeping the state secure, and maintaining public order. Preventing things from getting out of hand.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Can't have chaos in the streets every time someone disagrees with something.
Exactly. And a good example is the case of T.K. Rangarajan versus Government of Tamil Nadu. The court ruled that government employees don't actually have the right to strike.
Oh, interesting. Why is that?
Well, the idea is that if all government employees went on strike, it could bring essential services to a standstill, affect public order, the whole shebang.
Makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Where do we draw the line? Protecting the freedom to gather peacefully, but also preventing disruptions. Something for all you future lawyers out there to ponder.
It's a toughie, no easy answers. Requires a deep understanding of the law, the precedents, and how society is changing.
Speaking of gathering, there's also freedom of association, Article 19.1c. The right to form groups, unions, cooperative societies. Seems pretty vital in a diverse country like India.
Absolutely. Think about it. If you want to fight for a cause, protect your professional interests, you need to be able to team up, right? That's what this freedom is all about, giving people the power to act together.
But like all the others, there are those limitations. Public order, morality, sovereignty, and integrity, that sort of thing.
Right, gonna have some boundaries. I mean, if a group is promoting violence or hatred, the state has a duty to step in, right?
Right.
Protect everyone else, keep the peace.
Freedom comes with responsibilities, right? Always keeping the bigger picture in mind. Now, what about freedom of movement and residence? Articles 19D and 19.1. That's about being able to choose where you live and travel freely within India. Seems pretty straightforward.
On the surface, yeah. But as with all these rights, there's more to it than meets the eye.
So it's not just pack your bags and go wherever you want, whenever you want.
Not always. There might be situations where the state needs to intervene, you know? Public order, morality, protecting vulnerable groups, those kinds of things.
Ah, got it. So, like, there might be restrictions on movement in certain border areas for security reasons.
Exactly. Or during a health crisis, like a pandemic, the government might put temporary restrictions on movement to stop the spread of disease. It's about finding that sweet spot, you know?
Hmm.
Balancing individual freedom with the need to keep everyone safe and sound. And it's not like the government can just restrict movement on a whim. There have to be solid reasons, you know? The restrictions have to be proportionate to the actual threat and applied fairly to everyone.
Right? Can't just target certain groups or anything like that. Okay, enough about moving around. What about choosing your career path? That's freedom of profession, occupation, trade, or business. Right, Article 19(1).
Bingo! Economic empowerment, individual choice, it's all there. The right to pick your career, start a business, contribute to the economy, all that jazz.
It's like the Constitution is giving you a big old thumbs up and saying, go get 'em, Tiger, build your dreams. But even here, even with this freedom, there are limits.
Of course, got to have some ground rules. The state has a right to make sure certain professions, you know, the ones that impact public safety,
Right.
that they meet certain standards. Think medicine, law, engineering. You can't just
Wait a minute.
exactly. You need the right qualifications, the
Yeah.
training, the whole nine yards. Public safety comes first. And then there are regulations to protect consumers and make sure businesses are operating ethically. Those licensing requirements, for example.
So it's about finding that balance again.
Yeah.
Economic freedom, yeah, but got to protect people from harm or shady practices too.
And it's a moving target, really. Think about all the new technologies popping up, new business models, e-commerce, the gig economy. It's a whole new ballgame, and the law is constantly trying to catch up, figuring out how those reasonable restrictions apply in this ever-changing world.
Keeps things interesting for you legal eagles, right?
Yeah.
Always something new to figure out. Speaking of interesting, freedom of the press. It's kind of tucked under the umbrella of freedom of speech and expression, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not a separate right in itself.
True, but boy, is it important. The fourth estate, the watchdog, keeping those in power on their toes, making sure the public knows what's going on.
Essential for any democracy worth its salt.
Yeah.
A free press shines a light on the shady stuff, exposes corruption, holds those bigwigs accountable. Keeps everyone honest.
You got it. But let's be real, press freedom isn't always a walk in the park. Journalists face pressure from all sides. Politicians, corporations, even threats and harassment. It's a tough gig.
That's rough. But at least there's some legal protections, right?
Yeah.
And the courts have been pretty good about defending press freedom, recognizing how vital it is for a healthy democracy.
Oh, absolutely. There have been some landmark cases. Remember Brij Bhushan v. State of Delhi? The Supreme Court shut down censorship of a newspaper, made it clear that a free and vibrant press is non-negotiable.
A powerful reminder that we can't take these freedoms for granted. We all have a role to play in protecting them. The legal community, sure, but also everyday citizens who value a society where information flows freely.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Now, as we wrap up our little exploration of these fundamental freedoms, it's important to remember that Article 19 isn't just a bunch of rules and restrictions,
Bigger than that, right?
way bigger. It's a framework, a blueprint for how we balance individual rights with the needs of society. It reflects the core values that make a democracy tick.
Dipe stuff. So for our law students out there, it's not just about cramming those articles into your brains. It's about understanding the WHY behind them, the legal precedents that have shaped them, and the challenges we face in upholding these freedoms in a world that's constantly changing.
You hit the nail on the head. It's about developing that sharp legal mind, the one that can tackle tough questions, see all sides of an issue, and contribute to the ongoing conversation about how we can best protect these freedoms for generations to come.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Article 19, hopefully it's clear that understanding these freedoms and restrictions, it's not just about memorizing a bunch of legal stuff.
It's about getting those big picture ideas, the balance between what individuals can do and what society needs, the court's role in protecting those freedoms, and how these concepts change as the world changes.
Yeah, it's about seeing how these abstract legal ideas actually play out in the real world, how they shape the way our democracy works.
Think about it. Those cases, we talked about the debates about free speech online, the challenges to press freedom, they all show just how relevant Article 19 still is.
It's like this living document constantly being tested and reinterpreted as new situations come up, as society changes. And for law students like you, That's where the real excitement is.
Absolutely. You're not just learning about the past. You're preparing to shape the future of these freedoms. You're the next generation of legal minds who will be tackling these tough issues, figuring out how to best protect these rights in a world that's changing faster than ever.
Okay, before we sign off, I want to leave you with a little something to think about. If you could add a new reasonable restriction to Article 19 to deal with a modern day issue, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a good one. It really makes you think about how rights evolve and how we balance them with the challenges of our time. What do you think?
So many possibilities. It's a question that deserves some serious thought, and I hope our listeners will take some time to ponder it.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on LexTalks. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into Article 19 and that it sparked your interest to explore the world of Indian constitutional law even further.
Don't forget to follow, subscribe, and stay tuned for more deep dives into the legal topics that matter most. Until next time, keep those legal minds sharp.